Hi.
So I got a question for you.
What's up?
Are you a list person or a pile person? Like, do you make a list of things or do you make piles?
I make lists, but then based on the list, then I make piles.
Piles, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. My name is Olivia.
And I'm Milo.
Yeah, so I would say I make lists that might seem unrealistic. So then I'll make lists the night before of things I want to do the next day.
Okay.
So then my expectations are like here, but then the next day passes. I'm like, I can't do all this. And then
So you make unrealistic lists?
Yeah. And then I just end up making piles.
Yeah. I'm a list guy.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
I have a whole folder in my notes that's just for lists, like 4-day trips, 3-day trips, 2-week trips. If I'm getting underway on a ship, this is the list I need to take. Here's
packing list.
Here's
every time we go on a family vacation, Dad, we have a family group chat, and he sends out like things like, make sure we have all of these things because we're gonna have all of these things.
Yeah. Your mom's a pile person. She makes piles
around the house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is, it's an approach.
She's going to be listening to this and just like roll her eyes.
I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying like
the tone is different.
But your mom is, I will say, like as every time I make a list and I'm packing stuff, inevitably your mom will go like, did you remember this? And it won't be on my list and I'll have forgotten it. And so your mom is probably overall better at packing. She has a tendency, I think, to overpack, but like then she has everything. I have a tendency to do the opposite. Like I try to just pack as minimally as I possibly can. And then inevitably there's something I forget. So it depends on if you can afford to be overpacking, like you got the space and the suitcase weight that you can afford or whatever it is. She's got a great approach for that. If not, then I have a good enough approach for that. So anyway, travel tips. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Sponsored by TripAdvisor.
No, I bring it up because like right now, when this podcast comes out, you will have been in college. So we're actually...
When this comes out, this will be my second day in college.
Yeah.
Like in classes.
Well, you'll have been gone for like a week and a half.
Yeah.
By that point. But we're kind of stacking these up because you're going to be going away. I'm going to be going to Duke to study. So we're going to kind of be away from one another for a little bit. So we're sort of stacking these up as we prepare to release them. So right now around our house, there are piles all over the place. Mm-hmm. Piles for you, piles for me, piles for your brother. Things feel a little chaotic, as it were, but that's okay. We're, this is what grace is for, right? What we are going to talk about today is the importance of living with a spiritually formative model. Mm-hmm. And you and I talked about this
not that long ago.
Yeah. Do you want to share the context around that? Around like, or whatever
my concern, not concern. There was a season of life where I'll just be so real. I had expectations for my own love life and it was really heavy on my heart, like a kind of a burden, because I'm raised in this like Christian household that I'm like, I'm going to date to marry. So Lord, you know the guy that's for me, and here's a list of everything that I want him to be. I'm going to meet him in Italy, and he's going to be like this pastor on a villa, and we're going to meet on this bridge, and like, Lord, there he is. Like, so when I do a mission trip, like I'll meet him on the mission trip. Like it was very much
specific,
very like like over spiritualizing this whole thing. So I kind of like safeguarded that area of my life that I didn't want to really pry open. So I was just kind of giving it to God. So anyway, there was this whole season where I was just surrendering that to him. And right now, I'm entering a relationship with someone. And based on this model, it has helped me to value like what I need to be looking for in a relationship.
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, you know, your expectations will fail depending on if it's God condoned or not.
Yeah.
But setting realistic expectations, but also letting God have a heavy hand in it. So when I approached him about like, okay, like here's this guy, like how do I discern if this is something maybe I should step into or not step into? And so the context that he told me was for relationships. Like, how do you know this is someone maybe you want to pursue or not pursue based on this model?
Yeah.
And what you can see in that person.
Yeah. And so what we're going to look at today is this is one of those, you know, I feel like I'm saying this more and more often, but this is one of those podcasts where you're probably going to want to download the show notes to this. And people,
It will help you visually see.
Yeah. I got a message the other day from Pa Bud. He's like, hey, how do I get these show notes again?
Oh. So
I sent him the link to the particular episode that he was looking for. But if you visit our website, thisresilientsoul.com, you'll see all of the podcasts that are listed there. And underneath it, if you click on the podcast, it's like laid out like a blog, like you'll see it there. And then you'll see companion notes. And if you click that link, it'll give you a PDF, but then it'll also give you on the page, it'll give you all the notes that we're discussing here in the podcast. So this is one of those, anytime you start talking about a model, usually there's a whiteboard involved, you know, and you kind of pull out the marker and draw things out and hope that you grabbed the dry erase marker, not the permanent marker as you draw on the whiteboard. So this model is one that I've been using since 2005.
the year I was born.
The year you were born. And again, so like if you didn't listen to episode 29, I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to that one, because we lay out the importance of first principles and getting beyond the assumptions and traditions of our faith and getting to the core of what are the great questions to be asking first. And that is intended to sort of lay the foundation for this episode, which is episode 30. Can you believe we've
30
done
weeks?
30 of these episodes now?
Like that's almost like we're over halfway through the year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's we're on our we're way over.
Like 30 weeks is a whopper.
Does that feel like a lot?
Yeah, but I feel like we haven't been doing it that long.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's gone by quick.
Yeah.
So, you know, here we are in episode 30. What we want to lay out to you, and I've been living off of this model. So personally, like I've lived with this in my life. It's shaped our family in very significant ways. I've used this as a pastoral model as I've sought to disciple men and women in their walk with the Lord. There was a period of time when I was pastoring at Grace Chapel. This was one of the centerpieces for a spiritual leadership course we put together as far as what is the model that we need to be leading people in and with. And so this was what we presented and taught there. And so this is not something that like, oh, hey, we were thinking and, you know, this sounded good for the podcast. This is like very vetted, like living with this for the last 19 years type stuff. So what we're going to have some assumptions here, right? So one is that, you know, that you need to have a formational model out there. And where this one begins is actually in 2005, I attended a seminar conference called Pastors of Excellence that was taught out at Ashland Theological Seminary. And this was one of the components that they've led. I've tweaked it along the way to kind of make it my own, but formationally, this is where I was initially exposed to it. And out of that, they sort of laid out how there's these, they said working with Mike Tatlock, we kind of added a fifth one, these sort of 5 questions that are distinct to the human experience. You want to read these and then I'll comment on them, or do you want me to read them and then you comment on them?
I'll read them and then you comment.
Okay.
And then I'll comment again.
Great.
Okay,
Perfect.
cool. The 5. So it's kind of like a pyramid.
Well, we're not there yet.
Okay.
So just read these. These are the 5 questions that are distinct to the human experience.
Mm-hmm. What am I good at? Where do I belong? What is my purpose in life? What am I made of and who am I?
Yeah. So the first one, which is the competency question.
What am I good at?
Yeah. Which everybody is you're getting asked that question right now, right? You just graduated from high school. What was probably the most common question were asked?
What do you want to do and what are you good at?
Yeah.
Because what you want to do should align with
what's next.
What's next and like what you enjoy doing. So yeah.
Yeah, so there's the competency question, right? The second question is the community question, which is where do I belong? Everybody wants to belong somewhere. And again, we've been talking, you're kind of in a season of transition. You were in high school. A lot of your high school friends are moving away to go to college and other places. You're moving away to start. So you're going to be moving in with some people you've never met before, stepping into classes you've never taken before, with professors you've never had before, with students you've never sat alongside before, right? This is like, are you nervous?
I've been in enough schools where I know how to adapt.
Okay.
But I don't like the feeling.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that brings up an interesting thing, right? Because I think we've been in the military. You've been in a handful of schools now over the years. This is adaptability is important. And so that sense of community, like where do I belong, is something that's always on the forefront of your mind, right? Because it's if you're constantly transitioning, that means you're regularly asking that question. The third question is the calling question.
What is my purpose in life?
Yeah, because everybody wrestles with that. They might not use that language, but it is a sense of calling. Like, where is my meaning? Where is my purpose? How am I finding that? The fourth question is the character question, which is...
What am I made of?
Yeah. So, will I tell a lie? Will I be bold when I need to be bold? What are the values and character traits that are driving my behaviors? What is underneath all of that? Or do I kind of go with the flow? Do I, I'm this way with these people and I'm that way when I'm with those folks? Like, how am I learning those things? Because we all have to learn that stuff. What are my convictions that are in place? All that shapes our character. And then the last question, which is the core question.
Who am I?
Which that's the identity question. At the end of the day, what do people say who do I say I am, or what do I believe about who I am? So these are 5 questions that are distinct to the human experience. No other part of creation is asking these questions. Our cat, Jetta,
is not asking. What am I good at? Where do I belong? What is my purpose in life?
If the cat asks, like, what am I good at? Pretty much everything. Where do I belong? Wherever I want. What is my purpose in life? To make sure that these 4 people serve every need I have.
What am I made of? Dignity and grace.
What am I made of? Dignity and grace. That's not what came into my mind.
Fat and lard.
Who am I? You're Jetta.
Selfishness.
You're the cat. You're a cat who is the love our cat has is disproportionate to the love she gives.
Extremely.
Which is a great illustration for God's love for us, right? God loves us disproportionately, far more than we could ask or think, far more than we deserve, right? Your particularly your mom's love for our cat. Okay, so these are questions that are distinct to the human experience, right? These aren't questions that are, no other part of creation. And in fact, I would even argue that, like, in the angelic and demonic hosts, they don't ask these questions. So this is core to kind of who we are. Now the question becomes, like, when I ask the question, who am I, or what am I made of, or what's my purpose, and so on, like, I'm going to gravitate towards a model that helps me answer those questions. I'm going to gravitate towards something that for most of us was probably given to us. Unless we've been intentional about exposing ourselves and adopting other forms of thinking, other ways of sort of organizing our world, or, the thoughts we have about our world, about ourselves, about one another, about God, like the paradigms we operate under sort of shape how we answer these questions. There's a quote from the book Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer that I thought was really good. He says, if we're not being intentionally formed by Jesus himself, then it is highly likely we are being unintentionally formed by someone or something else. Now, this goes back to what we talked about in the previous podcast, right? What are those first principles? What are those questions we need to be asking that are the right set of questions that will set us up for the most amount of success? And I would argue success defined by I'm living a Christ-centered life, right? That my life is in pursuit of him, to be pointed and moving towards him. When I'm in that relationship, my life will be shaped in a particular way. Now, having said that I don't think those are the questions that most people are asking. In fact, I would argue there's probably a lot of people that show up at church on Sundays that would consider themselves Christian, don't ask questions in that sort of way. I think culturally we're asking a different set of questions. Do you want to walk through these?
Yeah. Our culture's response. Will this make me happy?
I think that's the number one question people feel. Not only are they asking, but they feel entitled to ask. You've seen that, right?
Yeah. I would also say, will this make me comfortable? Because, there's going to be seasons where you might not be happy, but you'd rather be comfortable.
Okay.
Like, you might not like your day, but you'd rather go home on your couch and binge watch a show.
Sure.
With your favorite takeout food. And be comfortable. Okay, the next question would be, what will make me independent?
I think that's right. I think you're onto something there, because and I wonder if that's it could be a generational thing or a life stage thing, because I think I actually have shifted those dominant questions. When I used to provide training, and I would teach on values and beliefs and what are your values and beliefs. And I would argue that if your dominant questions are what will make me happy, comfortable, and then the third question is what will make me secure, that'll shape the whole of your life, right? Being in the Navy, if those are the dominant questions in your life, you're going to have a really hard time in the Navy, because you're going to find yourself regularly unhappy. You're going to find yourself consistently uncomfortable, and you are putting yourself in an insecure position, an unsafe position, so that there can be safety for others, right? So if those are the dominant questions in your life, you're going to be constantly frustrated. I think we'll do this on another podcast, but I would have people write out what we call a warrior ethos, where they would have to identify, they would articulate their identity, their values and beliefs, their goals, and their relationships. And they would kind of articulate that into this is what a statement that would articulate, this is what the world can expect of me. And so as I would have people do that, I can't tell you, every week I would read these things where people would say like, my aim in life is to be happy. And I'd be like, man, that is so short-sighted, and it will fail you if that becomes your objective. That was their belief system. I wasn't there to argue with it, and I wasn't going to comment on it. That wasn't the role I was playing in that particular time. That wasn't my responsibility as an instructor in that course. If they were open to a dialogue about it, we would have that kind of conversation. But I would say, so take that aside. I would say, do you think how common do you think these beliefs are within the church today?
Common. Like, even if you think about it, like, would you still go to church if we had no AC? Would you still go to church if we didn't have children's? Would you still go to church if it wasn't a building but outside? Would you still go to church if there was no worship? Would you still go to church if there was church has made us like, oh, we're going to go to a place. There's a parking lot. There's a safe parking lot where I can park my car, so I know where it's at. Then I walk in and I'm getting greeted, so I already feel welcome. So I already have like this confidence. Oh, and there's coffee, so I'm like provided like food and like pleasure, and then if it's your first time, then there's a gift. So it's like, okay, now I'm gonna receive. So to just talk like constantly, like intaking, that's like, okay, now I'm comfortable. Like I have my coffee in my hand. We had like a soft worship song. Like everyone has beautiful voices. The smoke machine's on. Like what an experience. Like what the, like I feel the Holy Spirit in the room. You know, I hear a comfort, and I feel like messages have become more comfortable. And so we attend like a mega church, and there's a beauty in small churches because smaller churches and smaller congregations tend to be more hitting.
Possibly.
But depending on their
always.
like audience.
Sure.
Because, you know, mega churches like want to like speak in a way that can like apply in some degree.
Yeah, I think there's you could go both directions, right? The kind of the mega churches can get the rap for softening the truth.
And also, I would also say like contemporary churches.
Sure. But then also I would argue that sometimes small churches can do the same thing with the uncomfortable truths that congregation does not want to face. So go into your typical small church. I don't, typical is maybe not the right word. I'll say it this way. I've been in many small churches where the sin of gluttony is on full display. And I'm not saying this to be like condescending or condemning, but it is on full display. And, you know, there was one church I went to where, well, let me finish that thought. So it's on full display. How many times do you think that preacher is going to preach on gluttony? 0. Even though it's a clear sin within the life of the congregation. I've been in church where I pastored a church years ago. I won't say which one, but I pastored a church years ago. And 20 years later, your mom, or 15 years later, your mom and I swung back by and walked into the building and saw the pastor and the secretary. And I said, hey, do you have a new church directory? They gave me the new church directory. I knew everybody's name in that church directory with the exception of 4 names. Now, what does that tell you about that congregation?
They're not expanding.
They're not reaching out. So literally the congregation that was there 15 years ago is there today. And so are they being challenged? Are they being, you know, convicted to like, are you going into the highways and byways? Are you serving the poor and the marginalized? What are you doing to take the good news to those places? So my point is we have a tendency to gravitate towards communities. We're going to talk about that here in a bit, that will facilitate these things in our lives.
Yeah.
They'll make me happy. They'll make me uncomfortable. They'll make me feel secure, make me feel safe. Now, I'm not saying those are bad questions.
Right.
I like to be happy. I like to be comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, you don't look at a mattress and go, man, I really hope this makes me uncomfortable when I sleep at night. Right. We have an AC in this room that we have to turn off because it blows right on you, right?
Yeah.
Right. But we set the room before we start, so we're all nice and comfortable when we podcast, right? So, like, we got nice equipment. We live in a nice house. Like, I'm not opposed to these things in and of themselves, so I don't want to hear anybody saying that or hear. But I don't want to sound like I'm hypocritical, right?
Yeah.
But those are not. Well, let's talk about this. The consequences, right, of those being the questions we ask in life that you know, we talked about yesterday, those first principle questions. And again, if you haven't listened to that podcast, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to it, because we're building off of that. But if your first question is what will make me happy, what will make me comfortable or independent, what will make me secure or safe, then what you're going to end up with is a life this is where that upside down pyramid kind of comes in, right? That you're going to be heavy on kind of starting at the top and working your way down. So you're going to begin with this competency issue, which is you're going to put your time and effort towards getting good at something, because that's what culture says. That's where culture says you'll find happiness. Do what you love. Does this make you feel happy?
Because if not, get therapy.
Yeah.
Here's the solution to that issue.
Yes. And so there's this focus then of if you're graduating from high school, go to college, to become an expert in a particular field so you can get a job in that particular area, because then you'll make a certain amount of money. And if you make a certain amount of money, you'll be able to be secure. You'll be able to be comfortable. You'll be able to be happy, right? These are the promises. And so what's happening right now is people are graduating from college and the next job doesn't give them any of those things. It doesn't give them financial independence. It doesn't make them feel very comfortable. It doesn't, they're leaving as a sad little puppy when they go home from work each night. And they don't feel very safe because they don't feel like they're making enough money to justify the amount of work that they're doing. So where's their sense of meaning and purpose, right? It's imploding on themselves. But our culture will say, no, just get really, really, really good at something. In fact, we'll celebrate that. That's within American culture. That's the stories we tell. We tell the stories of the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates and the Elon Musks and the Henry Fords and the, like you go down the line here. And I would even say this has slipped into the church world. Look at this pastor, look how big his church is, or look at the, bands that are coming out of that congregation, or look at the swag that he wears when he preaches, or look at how tweetable do you know what I mean? Like the kind of the influential pastor, celebrity pastor thing, the celebrity church thing. It's all built on these competencies. They've gotten really, really good at something.
Yeah.
And then, so that's, and again, this is where, download the show notes. That'll help you see all this stuff visually. Then you can kind of go down to the next level, which is, so if your competency is there, then below that feeds, I'm going to get really good at these things. And then that feeds the next piece, which is what?
Calling?
No, it's the community piece.
Oh, yeah.
Are you looking at the same notes?
I don't know. I don't know, because I'm looking at the other pyramid.
Oh, no,
Sorry.
We're starting at the top.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Competency.
Oh, man, I felt like I gave you a softball.
Oh, okay, Dad.
Okay, so you start with competency.
Yeah.
Then what's below that?
Community,
right? So if I'm going to get really good at something, or if I want to get really good at something, then I have to find a peer group that will help me get really good at that thing, right? That will give me that sense of belonging. So if I want to be a phenomenal pastor, what should I probably find? Mentors. Yeah. Other phenomenal pastors
or
who will mentor
sources that will help you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If I want to, you're going to go to Regent, you're going to get a degree in marketing, right? So who should you be paying attention to? Who should you be friending on, TikTok?
I should be like friending resiliently.
Yeah, there you go. It's all right. Hey, good plug.
That's what I'm saying.
But do you see what we do? Is we go like, I want to get really good at this thing. So I'm going to find a community that supports me being really good at that thing. And so community becomes a way to feed getting good at it. And so you see this, as you take your marketing courses, you'll see this with a lot of the marketing stuff that's out there. If you want to really get good at something, follow these people, build this audience, build a community, build a tribe, Seth Godin wrote a book on tribes. Like, how do you build small groups of people for the purpose of these things? Which again is in and of itself is not a bad thing. But you're building a community so that you can be really good at something. So you can be known for being really good at something. Then below that is what?
Calling.
Right.
There we go.
Now, generally speaking, people will not think about calling until they get into high levels of responsibility. So, I doubt you work at Chick-fil-A. Do you feel called to work at Chick-fil-A?
No.
Okay. But do you keep working at Chick-fil-A?
Yes.
Why?
Because it provides me the things that and I will say it sharpens like my tools of service.
Okay, good.
Like, it's not like I'm working there because I get paid. I mean, that's a plus. I mean, hey, but it's also like,
you're not going to do it for free.
Yeah.
but you probably want your managers and you want the owner to feel a sense of responsibility and calling. To run a really good restaurant.
Right. And I kind of like what you said where, calling might not be like the first thing people think of until they've reached success.
I hesitate to say success. I would say until they reach responsibility. Success, certainly. Certainly. But sometimes you're not, the place you get to before success is oftentimes responsibility.
That's True.
Right. So if I've been given a job or a task, or I play a particular role in the community, oh man, I'm going to start asking questions about meaning and purpose. Why am I here? And it's responsibility, particularly if it's a responsibility in a high risk environment. So in the world I work in as a chaplain in the Navy, we talk a lot about meaning and purpose. What is your sense of meaning and purpose? Where is that coming from? What is driving it? What is the why behind what you're doing? Why? Why do we do that? Because we have people that work with significant levels of responsibility in high risk environments. I mean, recently I was down in Kings Bay, Georgia, working with the submarine community that we have down there. And I had the chance to get exposed to like how they do things and the type of people that work on these subs. And I've been around some of those folks, but I haven't really been around it. Yeah, a ton. And so it learned so much. We were down there for a week and I learned a ton about how that community works. And one of the things that was brought up was there's a senior chief who was giving us a tour of the training facilities. And it was a fantastic tour. And I had the chance to drive a sub. Like not actually, but like in the simulator, which was pretty cool. And one of the things he mentioned was like, so these are the submarines that can go out and wage nuclear war on our enemies. And one of the things he said was, we live with the reality that when we leave port to go on mission, if we have to do our job, that is launch nuclear missiles, then we are not coming home. Because there is no home to come back to. Can you imagine that that's your job?
Like that's the mentality you have to wrestle with.
Yes.
Every day you like walk onto that base, walk onto that ship.
So it's high responsibility, high risk. And those people have to wrestle with, is this what I want to do with my life? Like they have to have a sense of calling amidst all of that, because or else the sacrifice you're engaging in, it's going to be very difficult to determine it's worth it. Now, if your objective is, I want to be happy, I want to be comfortable, I want to be safe, you're probably going to steer clear of a lot of these kind of questions, right? You're not going to press into this stuff because you can't enter into high levels of responsibility and impact and have your happiness be your top priority and have your comfort be your top priority and have your safety be your top priority. Because if those are your top priorities, they won't bear the load that those responsibilities will demand of you. And so that's why it kind of grieves me a little bit when I hear people say that, like, well, I want to be happy. Because I'm thinking like that you're entering into a set of responsibilities and risks that value won't be able to
sustain and hold.
Yes, exactly.
And then I feel like that's where a lot of people like trip in. Like when life's hard, then they find things that will make them happy. Whether, like, not to be like blunt or like, but like drugs, like, and alcohol and misusing things with that, like trying to escape out of the reality you're in if happiness is your goal. Right.
So I want to get those endorphin hits, right? Or I'm going to do whatever that I can to sort of get the chemical wash.
Maybe if I gamble a little bit, I'll get more money and that way I'll be happy.
Or I'll feel the excitement and the joy and then all of a sudden it's the loss and the disappointment and right. So there's this, if your happiness, comfort, and safety is the constant priorities in your life, then you're going to be
tempted.
You're going to develop coping mechanisms to provide that for you in light of the responsibilities and risks you may have to take on in your life.
Yeah.
So, if you have kids in your life and if you're a single parent, man, that is a tremendous load, right? So the amount of temptations that are there to find escapes, and it could, you mentioned drugs or alcohol or whatever, but it could be something as simple as doom scrolling on your phone, or putting yourself in a place where you just shut out the world, not for the purposes of your like being intentional with times with the Lord, but for the purposes of numbing yourself. Right? You're gonna
Isolate yourself.
Yeah, you're going to more quickly prioritize those things. Okay, so that's the calling piece. So below that then is the character piece, right? So this answers the question, what am I made of? So it's a means to fulfill my calling in my culture so that I can accomplish my competency. So character is really only developed so I can take on these responsibilities, so that I can be in this community, so that I can execute these competencies. So it's a means to an end. It's not an objective in and of itself, right? So This is where you'll see people, they'll bend the truth.
Or over exaggerate.
Yeah, they'll exaggerate or tell a story because they want to be impressive. They want to have that sense of, belonging or be seen in a certain way or whatever it is. So they'll kind of shape their lives in a way, shape their character in a way that achieves these other objectives. And then below that is your core identity, right? Which is then, that's usually ignored because you really only deal with it in a time of crisis. And you only really ask the question of who am I when you absolutely have to, because you've probably defined yourself by a role you play. Who am I? I'm a chaplain in the Navy. I'm a pastor in the church.
I'm a father of 2 kids.
I'm a
husband.
Yeah, exactly. Which are roles, right? And those roles take on some responsibilities. And if I'm a certain rank or I have a certain amount of income or my kids have behaved a certain way or I've been married a certain period of time, it tells you I'm really good. I'm good enough at life, right? To be able to present this image that the world goes like, oh, awesome. You must be happy. You must be comfortable. You must live with a sense of safety and security. And again, I'm not, like we said, I'm all about people being happy and I'm all about people being comfortable. And I want people to live with a sense of safety and security. I think that's all fantastic. But the order in which you answer, if those are your first principle questions, it's going to drive everything in your life. And it's going to drive it in a way that is going to leave you, what I believe, it's going to leave you shipwrecked.
Yeah.
Because if this is an upside down pyramid, then all of your, not all of it, but the dominant amount of your emphasis is going to be put in those competencies and probably community. And you're going to diminish that, right? So if this is an upside down pyramid, the smallest part that you pay attention to is your identity. The next smallest part is your character. And then up from there. So it becomes so the problem is this, that works great when the tide is in. When the tide goes out and life is horrible and you're going through some kind of crisis, and it could be one of your own creation. It could be one that is the result of living in a broken and fallen world, right? When that happens, what's going to end up happening is your life's going to fall apart. And this is where, so it's a common thing. Unfortunately, it's an incredibly common thing that when people retire after they've been part of a vocation that's defined who they are, the bulk of their life, it's common that a few years later they die. Well, why is that? Well, their whole lives were wrapped around what? What they did, around their competencies. And who they were was defined by what they did. In fact, when we lived in Spain, there was somebody who was a retired service member. I won't say who it was, but they would, the first time I met them, they introduced themselves as, hi, I'm Senior Chief so-and-so. Now, this person had been retired for like 16 years, but they were Senior Chief so-and-so. What does that tell you about their identity?
They took pride in like what they did, and if it still applies, it still applies.
But does it apply? No, nobody's. It's like you were that. The Navy was a different Navy 16 years ago.
Now you're a veteran or retired.
Yeah,
like that's your new title.
Yeah. So, and this is one of the things I pay attention to. Listen to the stories people tell, and do they tell stories based upon back in the day when I was? And, it's kind of the Uncle Rico. If
My prime time.
right? If I could only go back to high school.
I could throw this football over that mountain. Watch.
You don't know what we're talking about. Do
Napoleon the Dynamite. Yeah, do yourself a favor.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's the negative side of the house, right? The positive side of the house is, how do we flip this? Okay, so we want to, reconsider the first questions we should be asking. So, a life in pursuit of Christ. Do you want to walk us through these questions? Do you see where we're at?
Sorry, I need to scroll down. Okay, life in pursuit of Christ. As a faith community, we seek to ask different sets of questions as we attempt to sort out what God would do in us and through us. First question, who is Jesus? And that comes from like Matthew 16:16.
Okay, so again...
Listen to the last episode.
Listen to the last episode.
This is like us to say like pause and then go back and give us another view.
Oh yeah, okay, cool, got it. What else? It's like, no. If you haven't listened to the last episode, we lay out the justification for how critical it is to ask that question. And it's so critical that in Jesus's ministry, he asks the question. To where, they have fed the 5,000. Actually, the way it's sort of laid out in Luke is Jesus sends out the 72. He says, I want you to go heal in my name, cast out demons in my name, and proclaim the kingdom of God has come. So they go out, they do those amazing things. They come back and they're like debriefing, right? How did it go? What happened? So they're telling Jesus all these things. And the crowds figure out where they're at. And these big crowds show up. Jesus teach them for a little while. And the disciples come in, they say, hey, it's getting late in the day. A ton of people here, 5,000 men, let alone women and children. We should probably be sending them home so that they can go eat. And what does Jesus say? You feed them. Now, he's saying you feed them to men who have just gotten back from healing in his name, casting out demons in his name, and proclaiming the kingdom of God. What I find fascinating is their response in that moment to a problem is send the problem away. Their response isn't, Lord, how do you want us to solve this problem? Their response is, these are all hungry people. It would take a year's worth of wages to feed them lunch. Why don't we just send them away? Which I would argue, if you're basing your life on the previous paradigm of prioritizing your comfort, happiness, and safety, you will always push problems away.
Yeah.
That will be your instinctual reaction. So what Jesus says is, they were like, send him away. And Jesus is like, no. Remember what he says to him? You feed him. And they go, well, all we got are these 5 loaves and 2 fish. And so he blesses it, multiplies it. They distribute it, right? So now they're part of solving the problem, which is fantastic.
With a miracle.
So they do all this. And then Jesus begins to kind of debrief with them again, because they've just been walking through the crowds handing out these 5 loaves and 2 fishes. They've just come back from a time of healing, casting out demons, and proclaiming the kingdom of God. And so in that context, Jesus looks at them and says, who do men say that I am? Like, what are people saying about me? And they go, well, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, some say some of the other prophets. And then what does he ask? Who do you say that I am? And I think every believer, not just believer, every person on the planet has to wrestle with that question. Who do I say Jesus is? And it's in that context, Peter speaks up and he says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, which isn't, the Christ meaning the anointed one, right? There's something on you because you're the Son of the living God. Like this is how because of what we've seen, because we've been healing in your name, we've been casting out demons in your name, because we've proclaimed, and we've seen you do all of these things. And we just fed all of these people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, right? The amount of of evidence that is in front of us for us to define who we are. What is interesting is he doesn't say you're the healer. He doesn't say you're the lunch provider, right? Who does he say he is? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That there's something anointed, Christ meaning the anointed one. That's the word Christ. Christos literally means anointed one. There's something about you that is different. And so it's in that context. So when I go in my life, I have to wrestle with that question. Who is Jesus? Second question.
How can I experience Jesus?
Okay, so in Matthew chapter 6, Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, don't worry about what you'll drink or what you'll eat or what you'll wear or where you'll live, right? Don't worry about any of that stuff, which are the most basic essentials in life. If you were to give somebody permission to worry about things, what would those things be?
Oh, I won't have enough money to pay this or do that or eat what I want to eat or do what I want to do.
It's the essentials in life, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of stuff we might worry about. They're not essentials.
That's true.
Right? So if you were to give somebody permission, like, hey, if I'm going to give you permission to worry about anything, it probably should be the most basic things in life, right? And Jesus goes like, hey, even the most basic things in life, I don't want you to worry about it. This is what I want you to do. I want you to seek first the kingdom of God. And his righteousness, meaning God's righteousness, to be in right relationship with him, with each other, with this planet, with yourself. And all those things, they'll be taken care of. They'll be added unto you, right? So the second question of, okay, then what is the experience that Christ is inviting me into? Well, he's inviting me into watching him, experiencing him meet my needs.
Yeah.
The most, and not like the nice stuff, which is great, but like the core to what I need in my soul, the core to what I need in my life, the core to what I need in my relationships. Christ goes, I want to meet those needs. I want you to experience me there. I was listening to a podcast a couple days ago, and it was an interview, and one of the persons mentioned how a lot of our like kind of emotions that are unhealthy, or our reactions to people that we recognize as unhealthy, come from these places where we had an experience of wounding that shifted our posture towards the way we interact with the world. So if I grew up in a home where if I didn't do everything just perfect, according to my dad's rules, that he would come home and beat me, does that shape the way I interact in this world?
Yes.
Yes. Does that shape the way I think of fathers?
Yes.
Does that shape the way I think of absent or permissive mothers? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so that that wasn't my experience. It was just an example. I want to be really clear. If that's somebody's experience in life, then to counter that experience in life, what do they have to have? A different experience.
Yeah.
It's not enough for them just to get a truth. They have to fundamentally step into a different experience that sort of rewrites the false beliefs that they might have.
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
Yeah. And I kind of like how you said, how can I experience Jesus versus how will Jesus intercede for me?
Okay.
Not like that he won't, but when it sounds like how Jesus intercedes for me, feels like we're being hand-fed by someone else. And it's just like, that's comfortable. Like, that's comfortable to hear.
Yeah.
Versus, how can I experience Jesus? Oh, waking up and, like, starting my day off and giving him time and surrendering my day and giving everything to him.
Yeah. And I think that's my responsibility. Like, so the question operates off the assumption there is a Jesus to be experienced. And the question operates off of the assumption there's a path to that experience. And I would say that begins with the first question of who is Jesus? That leads me to ask the question, okay, how do I experience him? And then that leads to the third question, which is what?
How am I to express Jesus?
So Grace, I kind of, a lot of this I framed when we were at Grace Chapel. In their cause statement, they said, they put it in those terms. Some people would say vision statement or purpose statement. They said, this is our cause, to experience and express the essence of Jesus Christ. And so as I thought about that, and it was Mike Tatlock who put that together while I was on staff there, like, and we worked on some of this stuff with one another, we stepped back and we're like, okay, so that asks the question, who is Jesus? It leads to the question of how can I experience Jesus? And it assumes I should be expressing him, right? So Jesus said in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, I want you to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth, right? There's an expression of your life that people should see and that people should be able to step into. And so is that my expression? And not just theoretically, but am I going to those places? What is my Jerusalem? And maybe we'll do that as a future podcast, how to break those things down, because I don't think we've done that.
Yeah.
But what is my Jerusalem? How do I understand my Judea? Where is my Samaria? How do I understand the ends of the earth? How do I put that in a framework that is applicable today that is probably understood differently when Jesus told the initial disciples about that, right? Okay, so all of that to say, so if you have the formational model, right, you have these 4 questions we're asking about competency, community, calling, character, and core. What we say, a life in pursuit of Christ, where does it all begin? It begins at that base layer, which is what area?
Core.
Right. So the foundation of my soul is shaped by my identity, right? So who I am is the thing I give the most amount of emphasis to.
And that's like the foundation.
Yes. So if the other was an inverted pyramid, right, with the pointy side down and the flat side up, this is the opposite of that. This is the pointy side up and the flat side down. So the bulk of the foundation is on that identity piece.
Right.
So who I am is what I want to give the most amount of my thinking to. Now, with that said, the most important thing about you, Olivia Curtis, the most important thing about you is what Jesus thinks of you. It's not what I think of you. It's not what your mom thinks of you or your brother or your boyfriend. This is still rather new, so we're exploring this language.
Dead.
But do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not what your friends think of you. It's not what your teachers think of you, it's not any of these things. The most important thing about Olivia Curtis is what?
What God says about me.
What God says about you.
And God's perspective of me. It's like pouring outside right now.
Rain. It wasn't supposed to rain today either. And the most important thing about me is what?
What God says about you.
Yeah.
Not what Milo says about you.
Yeah. Not even what I think about me. Not even what you think about you.
That's the temptation. Like, no one knows me better than myself.
Yeah,
so
which is not true. Yeah.
Yeah. But what God's like, and if you ask him, like, Lord, how do you see me? He'll show you.
Yeah.
He'll show, and he'll put you through stuff.
Yeah.
Or you'll be humbled.
Well, and so in light of that, when he puts me through things, what does that reveal? It reveals my character, right? So,
which is the next layer.
Yeah. So I start with that foundational piece and I go like, okay, how, man, do I speak up when I see somebody being mistreated? Do I speak up when I'm being asked a question and it's an uncomfortable truth and I could probably get away with not a lie, but sort of
kind of dismiss the conversation.
I can just, do you know what I mean? Like, what does that say about my character? Well, who am I? Well, this is core to who I am. So what does that say about what character needs to be developed? And then out of my character comes what?
Calling.
So my character, my calling, this is my distinct awareness of responsibility to lead others towards Christ. So I look at what I do through the lens of the kingdom. So you're going into marketing and you want to, you're getting a degree in marketing and a minor in biblical studies, right? You're going to take a bunch of biblical studies. Well, we need great people out there who are awesome at marketing, who look through the lens of kingdom purposes. Like your brother is going to school to become an accountant. We need Christians who bring a kingdom ethic to that field.
Yes.
And I think sometimes when we talk about calling, particularly in the church, we mean to be a pastor or a missionary or something like that, right? Which is like, okay, that sure.
Great.
Absolutely. But the guy who's the plumber, I want him to feel called to be a plumber.
Yeah.
Right? So that when he shows us at somebody's house to solve a problem on, you don't call a plumber because you're having a great day.
It's true.
You're calling a plumber because it's you got a problem on your hand and you don't want to be taken advantage of. And you're inviting a stranger into your home to solve something that might be embarrassing.
Yeah.
I want that plumber. I want the person who does that kind of work, whether it's, in the trades or, in management or whatever, to have that kingdom lens on it, right? That it's like, no, you walk through this in a way that why am I an electrician? Because this is a way I can express the kingdom. Anyway, that's a whole other tangent I have. Like a passion I have is for people to like live with a sense of meaning and purpose and calling to what they do, and not think, well, that's just reserved for
those people who have been equipped to do so. But it's also like, do you think that low of yourself? Honestly, do you have the confidence that God will provide you the opportunities for you to be a light?
Yeah. I mean, Paul, if you look in the New Testament, Paul was a tent maker. Why was he a tent maker? To fund his ministry. I don't think he was producing shoddy products. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, hey, that Paul guy, I know he's on fire for the Lord, but don't ever buy one of his tents. Do you know what I mean? They're garbage. No, it's probably like, that guy does a really solid work. If that guy wanted to, he could be the most amazing tent maker on the planet. I don't know if that's the case, but I imagine there was a standard he held himself to so that he could be the apostle God was calling him to be. Right? Why? Because of his character.
Yeah. Because
he knew who he was. He knew where his identity needed to be established, and that was in Christ. So then above calling then is community, right? So my community, that's the time, place, and people God asks me that I impact for his community, for his kingdom. So I step into a community not my first question is, what am I going to get out of this? What's the first question I'm asking?
How is this going to impact my walk for the kingdom?
Nope, not even that way. It completely invert the focus. So if the common question is like, I show up in a room and I'm going to ask, do I belong here? I show up in the room and I ask, how are these people going to help me? I would argue that's culturally where most folks are at. But what are the things I constantly challenge you and your brother on? Be interested before.
Interesting.
So I'm going to walk into the room and I'm going to ask, who can I have an impact on? Who can I help? Who can I come alongside? Do you see the shift in thinking? So I'm building a community not for the purpose to get something, not that I won't get something, but I'm building, I am surrounding a community for myself for the purposes of going, hey, when I step into here, I'm going to help other people experience Christ. I'm going to step into here and help people express him. I'm going to step into here and help other people to know who he is, to live that Christ-centered life, right?
Yeah.
To be in pursuit of him. Now, if my dominant question is, do I feel comfortable, safe,
and happy?
I'm not going to ask that question in community because it can be rather uncomfortable and walk into a room and look around and not know anybody. And the minute you do that, what do you want to do?
Leave.
right? To walk into a room and realize that I'm the only type of me in this room. Mm. You know, and you'll see this, right? You'll see it across jobs. You'll see it across races. You'll see it across economies, right? You walk into a room. Have you ever seen this before? You walk into a room and you'll see the white people gather up in one place. And what do you see? You might see black people gather up in another place. You walk into a room. I see this in the Navy. You walk into the room. You'll see the enlisted gather. You'll see the chiefs get into a pocket. You'll see the officers get into a pocket. You'll see the junior enlisted get into a pocket.
You'll see like small groups. All the girls go over here, and all the guys go over there.
Yeah. So we sort of segregate ourselves. Why are we doing that? Because it's where we feel safe. It's because that's what's comfortable. Mm-hmm. Yet, if I'm going to live this kind of formational model of community, where does my focus need to be? Hey, when I walk in here, I'm not seeing roles. The question I'm asking is, do these people know Jesus? Who here is in pursuit of Christ? Who here could be in pursuit of Christ? Who here needs to experience Christ? Do you see the shift in mentality? Then the last one is competency, right? So this is the opportunities and resources God has entrusted to me for his glory. So I'm going to get really good at something because I've been given these talents, because I've been given these gifts, because I've been given these opportunities, these resources.
For his glory.
For his glory. But that's the least important part of my life. The least important part. The most important part is who I am in him. Because like I was talking with somebody not too long ago, and we were kind of laying out this model. And I said, it was somebody who worked with their hands. And he was a believer, and we were talking about this specific topic. And I asked I said, if you were to, let's say, get in a car accident today, and you were to lose your hands, what would that do to your identity? Right? Because if you use your hands, and now you can't do that thing anymore that you've defined yourself by, you're wrecked. Because you've identified you've put your identity in something that is very tangible, that is competency based versus core identity based. Mm-hmm. Now, you and I talked about all this in the context of what?
Relationships.
Yeah. And entering into romantic relationships particularly. But I think this could be applied to like that kind of really tight group of friends I build around me as well. Or it could apply to the way I shape and prioritize my family life and who I let have access to my family. So the thing I'm looking for, in a core group of friends, or if I'm entering into a romantic relationship, the first question I'm going to ask is, what's their identity? What are they putting their identity in? And then what's their character like? And then where's their sense of calling? And then what kind of community do they have around themselves? And then what are they good at, right? And good at could be like they're charismatic, they're talented, they're good looking, they're all of those things, right?
Yeah.
But those things fade. Those things fade, right? Yeah. So our world says what?
That's the peak. Like that's your basis of everything.
Yeah. The world says start with the stuff that fades. It's like, well, what are we doing?
Yeah.
I don't want to start there. So the question is, and I would say, to our listeners, if you're looking at, okay, how do I build a good group of friends around myself? Or how do I build a community around me? Or, I want to step into romantic relationships. What are the kind of fundamental questions I need to be asking? The fear I see a lot of people have is like, if I ask these questions, my prospect circle gets small very fast.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it does. Probably does. But I'm not adopting a model to increase my prospect circle. I'm embracing a model for my formation to become like Christ. And then I'm going to trust him that he's going to bring the right people into my life that have these priorities in place.
Right. And when you and I were talking about this, like you said something, maybe like this is how I took it. But when you first meet someone or a community of people, you'll see competency first and then community second. You'll see what they're good at, what they look like, where they go to school, what they do, kind
it's
of.
above the waterline.
Yeah. And then the people that they hang around. So, but then the minute you like find someone that you want to invest in, everything below the surface will be apparent.
Yeah. You
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And you'll see it. And you'll be like, this is maybe something I don't want in my life. Or this is like, yeah, this is something I want to step into because I agree with where their motives are and where they want to take their life.
Yeah.
Because they've entrusted it in God.
Yeah. And so this might be, this could be a good podcast of like, if you're dating somebody or thinking about dating somebody, to send it to them and kind of go like, hey, listen through this. Again, the notes will probably be helpful to kind of visualize some of these things, but I would talk through this stuff before I got seriously involved with anybody relationally, on like a romantic level. I would talk through these things because this shapes expectations for life.
Yeah.
For how you will order your life. And I don't mean people that'll be like, give lip service. Like, oh, he loves Jesus. He goes to church. Listen, I know a lot of guys that go to church. I'm not sure they love Jesus Monday through Saturday, and so it's kind of going, all right, I want to step into a relationship, guys, like step into a relationship with a gal who she's more concerned about what Jesus thinks of her than what you think of her or what her friends think of her or what the amount of followers she has in her social profiles think of her. Like that's her priority is creating that. And I'm not saying anybody has to be perfect out of the gate with that.
Yeah.
But where are they willing to start? Are they wanting to start in that place of like, I'm gonna be dialing in my identity piece, and I'm gonna work my way up from there as Christ leads. Because again, all of this at the end of the day is about living a life in pursuit of Christ. Because going back to that quote by John Mark Comer, we're being intentionally formed by Jesus, or we're being unintentionally formed by something else. And I would argue that most folks don't realize what they're being formed by because they haven't really thought through some of these things. And so, listening to hopefully a podcast like this will help sort of give some good questions in place. All right. Any closing thoughts?
Live a life in pursuit of Christ, guys. Who Jesus is, how can you experience him, and how are you to express him?
Yeah. Again, show notes.
Look at them. They help. Like we're looking at them right now, and that's kind of how I'm processing through all these. But, share. Follow, rate, and review this podcast, please. We're both...
We're not begging.
We're not begging.
But we kind of are.
We're praying. I'm kidding. We are praying, though. Yeah, by doing, like, sharing, following, reviewing, rating, like, you're helping us out, like, a ton.
And, like, we're not paid to do this.
No.
Right? This is a Curtis family self-funded effort, right? This is out of, because like we wanted to figure this out. So like if you're getting value out of this, the best way to demonstrate that value is to share this with somebody.
That's good.
To leave us a review, give us a rate. Not that we need that's it. Not for because we're putting our identity in Christ, right?
Right.
If we see that the ratings are down to the reviews, it's like, all right, whatever. That doesn't. I care because I want to do a good job, but I'll take the feedback. But it's not wrecking me, right?
Right.
But man, that'll help other people know what to anticipate, what to expect.
That's good.
You can follow us on the socials.
Yep. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram's olivia.grace _28. And then Facebook, Olivia Curtis.
You can find me on Milo Curtis on x.com, Facebook, Instagram. Sign up for our newsletter. You can do that by visiting thisresilientsoul.com. You can always email us, hello@thisresilientsoul.com. We're always looking for ways to deepen the quality and expand the impact of this podcast. So if you have some ideas on how we can do that together, we welcome your input. Thank you all for listening. We know this was a long one.